Let me tell you something that most men never figure out. The conversations that make women feel genuinely drawn to someone, genuinely interested, genuinely alive in a way they weren't before the conversation started, are almost never the ones where the man said the most impressive things. They are the conversations where he asks the most meaningful questions. Because here is what nobody tells you about attraction. A woman does not fall for the man who talks the most. She falls for the man who makes her feel the most understood, the most seen, the most interesting version of herself. And the only way to create that feeling consistently, authentically, in any setting is through the quality of what you ask, not what you perform. Today, we are talking about 6 specific questions, not pickup lines, not tricks, genuinely powerful, psychologically grounded questions that open people up, that move a conversation from the surface into something real, something that stays with her long after you've both gone home. Here's the specific pain I want to speak to. You've had conversations with women you were genuinely drawn to, conversations that felt good, that flowed, that seemed to be going somewhere, and then somehow arrived nowhere. The energy was there at the beginning, and then it just leveled off, became ordinary, became forgettable, and you walked away wondering what went wrong because nothing technically went wrong. You were funny enough, you were present enough, you didn't say anything offensive or awkward, but you also didn't say anything unforgettable. The conversation stayed on the surface. Work, hobbies, weekend plans, the mutual acquaintance you share, and the surface, no matter how pleasantly covered, doesn't create the kind of emotional resonance that makes a person think about you at 2 in the morning. What creates that? Depth, genuine, mutual, brave depth. And depth in conversation is almost always initiated by a question that nobody expected, a question that requires something real to answer. That's what we're building today. Before the 6 questions, you need to understand the psychology underneath why this works, because it completely reframes how you approach conversation. When you make a statement, you are sharing yourself. That has value. But when you ask a meaningful question, one that requires genuine reflection to answer, you do something far more powerful. You invite her into her own depth. You create the conditions for her to access parts of herself that ordinary conversation never reaches. And here is the key insight. People associate the feeling of accessing that depth with the person who created the conditions for it. She doesn't think, that question made me feel interesting. She thinks, something about him makes me feel interesting. The emotion attaches to you. The depth she experienced in answering your question becomes, in her emotional memory, something she experienced because of you. This is not manipulation. This is emotional intelligence. This is understanding that real connection is not built through performance. It is built through creating space for another person to be fully, genuinely themselves. The right question is that space. This question does something immediate and striking. It signals that you are not interested in the version of her that everyone else gets. Most conversations stay in the territory of shared opinion and social consensus. Nobody wants conflict. Nobody wants to say the uncomfortable thing. So everyone presents the agreeable, palatable version of their perspective and walks away feeling vaguely unsatisfied because nothing real was exchanged. When you ask this question, you are giving her explicit permission to be different, to share a conviction she normally keeps quieter, to be the version of herself that thinks things through and arrives at conclusions that don't always match the room she's in. That permission is rare, and the relief of being given it, the relief of being asked for your real perspective by someone who actually wants it, creates an immediate warmth toward the person who asked. Listen without judgment when she answers. Ask genuine follow-up questions. Let her see that you find her actual perspective interesting, not the version she tailors for general consumption. That experience of being interesting to someone without having to be agreeable is deeply, lastingly attractive? This question has two parts, and both parts matter. The first part, what did you want to be, reaches into something unguarded and genuine. Childhood dreams exist before self consciousness fully develops, before the pragmatic editing of adulthood, before the voice that says, be realistic, drowns out the voice that says, this is what I love. Asking about them reaches back to a version of her that was purely, honestly herself. The second part, what happened to that dream, is where the real depth lives, because almost everyone has a story there, a dream that was encouraged and then quietly discouraged, a passion that life circumstances redirected, a version of herself that she had to let go of and perhaps hasn't fully mourned, or perhaps one that she's quietly still holding on to in some form, in some corner of how she spends her Sunday mornings or what she reads when nobody's watching. This question invites story, it invites reflection. It invites her to share something about the arc of her own life that she doesn't usually get asked about. And when someone asks about your arc, when they want to understand how you became the person you are, you feel cared about in a way that small talk never produces. Let me pause here because this is critical, and it's where a lot of men lose what the question created. Asking a meaningful question is the beginning. What you do with the answer is everything. When she responds, really responds from somewhere real, the worst thing you can do is immediately redirect to your own story. To say, oh, that's interesting. I also used to want to be, and take the conversation back to yourself. That move, however innocent, communicates. I asked, but I wasn't really listening. I was waiting for my turn. Instead, stay with her answer. Ask a follow-up that shows you were actually there for what she said. Reflect something back. Let her know that what she shared landed, that it meant something, that you found it genuinely interesting. This quality of staying with someone's answer is so rare that women will remember it. Specifically, the man who actually listened when she answered his question, the man who didn't rush past her response on his way to sharing his own. That man becomes unforgettable, not because of what he said, because of how fully he received what she said. This question works on multiple levels simultaneously, and its impact is immediate. First, it introduces the concept of courage into the conversation, and courage is one of the most universally attractive qualities a person can demonstrate or discuss. By asking about her experience of fear and how she moved through it, you're inviting her to share a story about her own bravery. You're giving her the opportunity to be impressive in front of you, not in a performed way, but in a genuine, earned way. Second, this question opens the door to vulnerability without demanding it. She can answer with something relatively light, a new experience she tried, or she can go deeper, a risk she took emotionally, professionally, personally. Either answer is valid, but the question creates the permission structure for depth, and people who are drawn to you will choose depth. Third, and this is the quiet power of this question, it almost always creates reciprocal disclosure. She will answer and then ask you the same question. And now you have the opportunity to share something genuine about yourself, something that shows you have also pushed through fear, that you are also a person who chooses growth over comfort. That mutual exchange of courage, of vulnerability, of real personal experience is the foundation of actual intimacy. And this question is one of the most natural ways to build it. This is the question that separates extraordinary conversations from merely good ones, and it requires a certain kind of courage to ask, which is part of why it works. Most social conversation is built on a foundation of pretending to have things figured out. We present completed versions of ourselves, the edited, assembled, confident-seeming self that knows what it wants and where it's going. Because admitting that we're still in process, still uncertain, still working something out, that feels risky in most social contexts. When you ask this question, you dismantle that pretense with a single sentence. You are essentially saying, I don't expect you to be finished. I am interested in the parts of you that are still becoming something. That is a profoundly welcoming message. It tells her that her uncertainty is not a liability in your presence, that you are not looking for someone who has it all together, that you find the in process, still figuring it out version of her genuinely interesting. Most women carry parts of themselves they feel they should have resolved by now. Questions about what they actually want from life, uncertainties about who they're becoming, ongoing negotiations between who they were raised to be and who they're choosing to be. Being asked about that by someone who seems genuinely curious rather than judgmental creates a relief so significant that it almost always produces real, honest, meaningful conversation. The second half of this question, not the Instagrammable version, the real one, is where all the power lives, and that qualifier is essential. Without it, this is a generic question with a generic answer. Travel, brunch, sunshine, friends. The curated version, the version that performs a desirable life rather than describing an actual one. With it, the question becomes an invitation to be real, to drop the performance and describe what actually restores her, what she actually craves, what a day that fits her specific, particular, individual self actually looks and feels like. Maybe her real perfect day involves being completely alone, which she feels slightly embarrassed about in social settings. Maybe it involves something humble and quiet that doesn't sound impressive, reading, cooking, walking without a destination. Maybe it involves something she's never actually allowed herself to prioritize because she's always optimizing for what others expect from her. When she tells you that version, when she trusts you enough to skip the performance and describe the real thing, she has shown you something most people in her life probably haven't seen. And being the person she trusted with that version creates a specific kind of closeness that is hard to replicate through any other means. Save this one. This is the question that ends the conversation with the highest possible resonance. And it does something genuinely extraordinary. It is a meta question, a question about what questions she wishes she got. And what it communicates underneath its structure is this: I see you as someone who has more going on inside than the conversations you usually have allow for. I want to know the part of you that people keep missing. That message, delivered through a question rather than a statement, is one of the most powerful things one person can say to another. Her answer will almost always surprise you. People carry interests, experiences, and inner worlds that never get asked about, because life's social choreography keeps most conversation in predictable patterns. The question that nobody ever asks her might be about her relationship with her own identity, about something she survived, about a belief she holds quietly, about a dream she's never shared because nobody ever created the opening. You just created the opening, and then you listen, really listen, with the unhurried presence of someone who asked because they actually wanted to know. That is the conversation she will remember. That is the moment she will think about later, not because you were impressive, because you were genuinely there, curious, present, and interested in the specific, irreplaceable person she actually is. Let's step back and look at what these 6 questions share, because the pattern reveals the principle. Every single one of these questions does the same essential thing. It reaches past the social performance a person maintains in most interactions and invites the real self to come forward, the real perspective, the real dream, the real courage, the real uncertainty, the real desires, the real inner world that most conversations never touch. And every single time you successfully invite someone's real self into the space between you, every single time someone feels genuinely met by your attention and your questions, they experience something so rare and so satisfying that they associate the feeling entirely with you, not the question, not the conversation, you. That association of feeling fully alive and fully seen in someone's presence is what people describe when they say they felt an instant connection, an inexplicable pull, something they couldn't put into words. Now you know what it is, and now you know how to create it, not through tricks, but through the genuine, skilled, courageous act of being truly interested in another person. Here is what I want to leave you with today. The most attractive thing a human being can be, in any room, in any conversation, at any stage of life, is genuinely, specifically, courageously interested in the person in front of them, not interested in impressing them, not interested in managing their impression, not performing curiosity as a strategy, actually, really, deeply interested in who they are, in the parts that don't usually get asked about, in the dreams that got edited down by real life, in the courage they've shown and the uncertainty they're still carrying. That kind of interest is not a technique, it is a way of moving through the world, a commitment to treating every person you connect with as someone whose interior life deserves your genuine attention. The 6 questions we talked about today are just the beginning. They are an entry point into a different quality of conversation, the kind that both people walk away from feeling more alive, more known, more themselves than they did before it started. That's what you're really offering when you ask a question that matters, not a path to attraction, though that often follows. A moment of genuine human connection, which is rarer and more valuable than almost anything else available to us. Go have a real conversation today. Ask something nobody else thought to ask. Stay with the answer. Be genuinely there. That's it. That's the whole practice. If today gave you a new framework for the conversations that matter, subscribe. Every week, we go this deep into psychology, attraction, and what it means to show up as a fully present, emotionally intelligent human being in your relationships. Real insights, honest conversations, nothing performed. See you in the next one. You already have everything you need to make the next conversation unforgettable.